There is a number at the heart of Bitcoin that most people treat as a technical detail. 21 million. That is the total number of Bitcoin that will ever exist. Not 21 million today with more to come later. Not 21 million as a guideline, subject to revision if circumstances change. 21 million, forever, as an absolute mathematical ceiling that no human being, no institution, no government, and no emergency can override. Most people who encounter this fact for the first time treat it as a curiosity, a design choice, an arbitrary number picked by an anonymous programmer in 2008 and baked into a protocol. Interesting, perhaps. Important, maybe, but not something that requires deep thought. I want to convince you in this video that this is exactly wrong, that the number 21 million is not a technical detail, that it is one of the most profound philosophical statements made by any technology in human history, that it represents a complete break with the monetary philosophy that has governed civilization for the past 50 years, and in some ways, for much longer than that. And that understanding why this number matters, at a deep level, will change how you think about money, about limits, about freedom, and about what it means to build a civilization that lasts. Let's start with a question that sounds simple but isn't. Why does scarcity exist? Not in the trivial sense, not just because there isn't enough of everything for everyone. That's a description, not an explanation. I mean, what is the deeper function of scarcity in a well-ordered world? What does scarcity actually do? Here is one answer, and I think it is the correct one. Scarcity forces honesty. When something is scarce, the choices you make about it are real choices. Real in the sense that they have real consequences. If you spend your scarce time on one thing, you cannot spend it on another. If you give your scarce attention to one person, you cannot give the same attention to another simultaneously. If you use your scarce resources to build one thing, you cannot simultaneously use those same resources to build something else. Scarcity is the mechanism by which reality imposes accountability on decision-making. It is what makes choices meaningful. It is what distinguishes genuine commitment from empty promise. And it is what makes long-term planning possible. Because a scarce resource that you hold today will still be scarce tomorrow, which means it retains its value, which means your plans built around it are not constantly undermined by unexpected changes in the rules. Now think about what happens when you remove scarcity from money. When money can be created at will. When the supply is not fixed but elastic, not governed by physical reality but by institutional discretion, then the choices made using money are no longer fully real in the sense I just described. The person who saved money made a real sacrifice. They deferred consumption. They traded their time. They gave up something now for something later. But the value of what they received in exchange for that sacrifice can be diluted at any time by a decision made in a room they were never invited into, by people whose interests are not their own. The scarcity that made their choice meaningful was an illusion. The sacrifice was real. The reward was not fully guaranteed. This is not just an economic injustice. It is a philosophical one. It is a violation of something fundamental about the relationship between cause and effect, between effort and reward, between the real world and the monetary system that is supposed to represent it. 21 million is the answer to that violation. It is a hard limit, a constraint that cannot be negotiated, lobbied away, or suspended for reasons of emergency. It is the reintroduction of genuine scarcity into money, for the first time in the modern era. But I want to go deeper than this, because the philosophical implications of a hard cap on money supply extend far beyond economics. They touch on some of the oldest and most important questions in human thought. Let's talk about the philosophy of limits. There's a strange paradox at the heart of human freedom. We tend to think of freedom as the absence of constraint. More choices equal more freedom. More options equal more possibility. Remove the limits and you liberate the person. But this intuition, when examined carefully, turns out to be wrong, or at least deeply incomplete. The ancient Greeks understood this. The Stoics in particular built an entire philosophy around the idea that genuine freedom comes not from the removal of all constraints, but from the right relationship with constraints. Epictetus, who was literally a slave, argued that the free person is not the one with no chains, but the one who has learned to distinguish between what is in their control and what is not, and who has made peace with the limits of the latter. This sounds paradoxical until you think carefully about what unlimited freedom actually produces. Unlimited freedom. Freedom from all constraint, all consequence, all accountability, is not liberation. It is anxiety. It is paralysis. It is the condition the philosopher Barry Schwartz called the paradox of choice. When every option remains open, no commitment is fully real, no decision is fully made, no identity is fully formed. The person with unlimited options is, in a profound sense, less free than the person who has chosen a path and committed to it, because the uncommitted person must always be hedging, always reconsidering, always keeping every option alive at the cost of investing fully in any single one of them. Now apply this to money. A monetary system with no limits, where supply can always be expanded, where the rules can always be rewritten, where the promises made today can always be qualified by the decisions made tomorrow, is not a more free system. It is a more anxious one. It is a system where no commitment can be fully trusted, where no plan can be made with full confidence, where the foundation is always potentially shifting. A monetary system with a hard limit is paradoxically more liberating, not because it removes options. It doesn't remove anything from the real economy, from real production, from real human creativity and effort, but because it makes one crucial thing certain: the unit of account in which you measure and store value will not be debased. The foundation will not shift. The promise will be kept, not because someone is trustworthy, but because the mathematics makes breach of promise impossible. Certainty about the monetary foundation is what makes genuine long-term planning possible, and genuine long-term planning is what makes genuine freedom possible. The freedom to commit, to build, to invest, to sacrifice in the present for a better future, with confidence that the sacrifice will be honored. 21 million is not a cage, it is a foundation. Now I want to talk about a deeper question. Not just why a hard limit on money is philosophically valuable, but why this specific mechanism, a mathematical protocol enforced by a decentralized network, is philosophically distinct from every previous attempt to impose monetary limits. Because humanity has tried to impose monetary limits before. The gold standard was an attempt to limit the money supply by anchoring it to a physical substance. The Bretton Woods Agreement was an attempt to impose monetary discipline through international treaty. Countless constitutions and laws have attempted to constrain the money-creating powers of governments. They all failed. Not immediately, not all at once. But eventually, when the pressure was sufficient, when the war was expensive enough, when the recession was deep enough, when the political cost of discipline exceeded the political cost of debasement, every institution-based monetary limit has been abandoned. Why? Because they were all ultimately enforced by humans. And humans can be pressured, persuaded, corrupted, or simply wrong. The gold standard required governments to honor their commitment to convertibility. And when honoring that commitment became politically inconvenient, they stopped honoring it. The Bretton Woods Agreement required the United States to maintain a fixed exchange rate between the dollar and gold. And when maintaining that rate became unsustainable, Nixon ended it in an afternoon. Every previous monetary limit was a promise. And promises, no matter how solemnly made, can be broken. Bitcoin's 21 million is not a promise. It is not a commitment made by any person or institution. It is a rule written in mathematics and enforced by a decentralized network of thousands of independent nodes distributed across the globe, none of whom has any authority over any other, none of whom can be pressured by any government or institution to change the rules. There is no central bank to call. There is no board of directors to lobby. There is no president to sign an executive order. There is no emergency that creates an exception. The 21 million is not a policy. It is a fact of the protocol. as immutable, within the system, as the laws of mathematics themselves. This is philosophically unprecedented. For the first time in human history, we have a form of money whose scarcity is enforced not by human will, but by mathematical law. Not by trust in an institution, but by the structure of the system itself. The implications of this are enormous, and not yet fully understood. Let me try to articulate some of them. First, it means that for the first time, saving is genuinely protected. Not protected by the goodwill of a central bank, not protected by the restraint of a government, not protected by the honor of a counterparty, protected by the protocol. If you hold Bitcoin, no one can dilute your holdings by creating more Bitcoin. Your share of the total supply is fixed by mathematics. Every Satoshi you hold today will be the same fraction of the total supply in 10 years, in 50 years, in 100 years. This has never been true of any fiat currency in history. It was approximately true of gold for extended periods, but only approximately, because gold supply is not truly fixed, only very slowly increasing. And gold supply is still ultimately governed by physical reality and the economics of mining, which can change with technology or discovery. Bitcoin's supply is governed by a mathematical protocol. The difference is not one of degree. It is one of kind. Second, means that Bitcoin forces honest accounting of time. Every Bitcoin in existence represents real human time and energy that was spent to acquire it. Through mining, which requires real electricity and real computational work, or through exchange, which requires real goods or services traded for it. The 21 million cap means that the total amount of Bitcoin can never exceed the total amount of real work done to bring it into the economy. There is no way to create Bitcoin without cost. There is no way to expand the supply without doing the work. This is profoundly different from fiat money, which can be created at virtually zero cost. A digital entry in a ledger, a keystroke, a decision in a meeting room. The cost of creating a dollar bears no relationship to the cost of earning one. The cost of creating a Bitcoin is always roughly equal to the cost of earning one, because the difficulty of mining adjusts to maintain this relationship. The monetary system is honest about what it costs. Third, and most philosophically profound, the 21 million cap represents a commitment to the future that no previous monetary system has been able to make. Think about what it means to adopt a monetary system with a genuinely fixed supply. It means accepting that you cannot solve your problems by expanding money. It means accepting that if you want more, you must create more value, more production, more real wealth. It means accepting the discipline of scarcity as a permanent feature of the monetary landscape, not a temporary constraint to be shed when convenient. This is, in the deepest sense, an act of intergenerational commitment. By locking in the supply, the builders of Bitcoin made a promise not just to today's users, but to every user who will ever exist. A promise that the rules will not change, that the foundation will hold, that the work done today to earn and save Bitcoin will be honored by the protocol in 10, 50, 100 years. Previous generations could not make this promise credibly, because the institutions that would have had to honor it were always capable of breaking it. Bitcoin's promise is made not by any person or institution, but by mathematics. And mathematics does not change its mind. This is why I believe the 21 million cap is one of the great philosophical innovations of the modern era, comparable in its implications to the great insights of science, philosophy, and law that shaped the civilizations that came before. It is the first credible answer to one of the oldest problems in the theory of justice. How do you bind the powerful to their promises? How do you create a system in which commitments made today will be honored tomorrow, regardless of what pressures arise? How do you build an institution that cannot be captured by the interests of the powerful at the expense of the powerless? The traditional answers have been constitutions, laws, treaties, independent institutions, separation of powers. All of these are genuine innovations. All of them have provided real protection in real cases, and all of them have ultimately been insufficient, because they are all, in the end, enforced by humans, and humans can always find reasons to make exceptions. Bitcoin's answer is different. It removes the human from the enforcement mechanism. The rules are enforced by the protocol, not by the people who use it. No one needs to be trustworthy, because trust is not required. The mathematics does the work that human virtue has never been able to do consistently. Now I want to address an objection, because intellectual honesty requires it. The objection is this: can the protocol be changed? And the answer is, in principle, yes. Bitcoin is open source software. Anyone can propose a change. If a sufficient majority of miners, nodes, and users agreed to change the 21 million cap, they could. This is true. And it is also, practically, the most robust security guarantee in monetary history. Because changing the 21 million cap would require the voluntary agreement of millions of independent participants, distributed across dozens of countries, each of whom has a powerful financial interest in maintaining the cap, because the cap is precisely what gives their holdings value. The proposal to expand the supply would require convincing millions of people to voluntarily dilute the value of their own savings. It would require consensus among a network that was explicitly designed to have no center of authority, no single point of pressure, no mechanism by which any one actor can impose their will on the whole. It has never been done. It will not be done. Not because it is technically impossible, but because the incentive structure of the network makes it socially and economically impossible. The 21 million is protected not just by mathematics, but by the aligned interests of every participant in the network. This is a new form of governance. Not governance by constitution, which can be amended. Not governance by institution, which can be captured. Governance by aligned incentive, a system in which the rule survives because every participant benefits from its survival and loses from its violation. It is fragile in theory and robust in practice. And the longer it survives, the more robust it becomes. Because every year that passes without the cap being changed adds to the evidence that it will not be changed, which increases the confidence of new participants, which increases the value of maintaining the cap, which makes it less likely still that anyone would propose changing it. This is a virtuous cycle, unlike anything that has existed in monetary history. Let me end with a reflection on what this means for civilization. We live in an age defined by what the philosopher Nassim Taleb calls the absence of skin in the game, a world in which the people who make consequential decisions often bear little or no personal cost for the consequences of those decisions. Central bankers who expand the money supply do not have their own savings inflated away. Politicians who run deficits are not alive when the debt comes due. Executives who manage companies for short-term stock prices have often sold their shares before the long-term damage becomes visible. This misalignment of incentives, this separation of decision and consequence, is one of the deepest structural pathologies of the modern world. And it is, in large part, a product of fiat money, which allows costs to be deferred, hidden, and transferred to people who had no say in the decisions that created them. Bitcoin's 21 million reintroduces skin in the game at the monetary level. The supply cannot be expanded to solve today's problems at tomorrow's expense. The costs of bad decisions cannot be hidden in monetary inflation. The bill cannot be sent to the future. Whatever is spent must be earned. Whatever is taken must be given. This is not a small change. It is a reorientation of the entire incentive structure of civilization around the principle that consequences are real, that commitments must be kept, and that the future, the people who have not yet been born, who cannot vote, who cannot lobby, who cannot protest, deserves the same honest accounting as the present. 21 million is not a number. It is a philosophy. It is the philosophy that says, the future is real. That promises matter. That limits are not prisons but foundations. That honest accounting is not a constraint on human freedom, but its prerequisite. And it is the first time in the history of money that this philosophy has been encoded into the monetary system itself, not as a promise that can be broken, but as a mathematical law that cannot. If you believe that civilization is built on kept promises, if you believe that the future deserves the same respect as the present, then you already believe in the philosophy of 21 million, whether you know it or not. Subscribe, and we'll keep exploring what it means to build a world on foundations that hold.